Hello everyone, it's Shari here today, and in today's video I'm going to be making this card that is inspired by graffiti that you see on brick walls. So I'm going to start with a stitched rectangle panel. This is just cut from some Nina Solar White cardstock, and I'm going to be using both the brick stencil as well as the conversation heart stencil, just the large hearts, not the words. And what I'm going to do to start out with is I'm going to create my brick wall. So this rectangle die that I used is the largest of these small stitch rectangles, so it's smaller than the front of an A2 size card. So that'll give me a border around it. And I'm just lining up my brick stencil and taping it to the back with a little bit of Post-it note tape. Then I'm going to use some opaque grit paste. So this is a white paste. It's not translucent. So you're going to have that bright white color, and it also has a gritty texture to it. So you're going to get that cool texture of a brick wall. So I'm just going to scoop that out with my palette knife here and just completely cover this entire panel with that paste. So I'm carefully making sure that all these bricks get filled in, and I'm working my way down the panel. Making sure I go all the way to the edges. Although you might have kind of a cool look if you stopped it before you got to the edges, but I wanted this one to go all the way to the sides. And then I'll just scrape off any extra that is on top of that stencil so that everything is the same thickness. So once I've got that all applied, I'm going to very carefully pick this up, and it's going to kind of warp a little bit because that is a lot of paste on this piece of cardstock. Just be very careful with it, and you can gently lift it up to reveal the brick pattern below. And then I'm going to set this aside to dry and make sure I go and clean my stencil immediately so that doesn't dry on there. So this has dried for quite a while. It's nice and dry now. And you can see how that panel is going to layer over some striped rainbow from Hello Sunshine. And then I also have this Scripty Love cut from some Narwhal cardstock. That's going to be my sentiment. I've picked out some ink colors that match the stripes on that Hello Sunshine paper. And that's what I'm going to use to ink my hearts. And I'm only going to be doing single hearts. I don't want all these hearts. So what I'm going to do is take my Post-it note tape and just mask off around one heart so that I basically have a single heart stencil. So now that I have my one heart all masked off, I can start to ink my hearts onto my brick wall that I've created. And I'm using my media mat here and some magnets to hold this down so I don't have to worry about tape and nothing's going to move around. And I'm going to go in with the colors that I picked out. So I'm going to start with Guava. That is the one that I picked out to match the pinks in the pattern paper. And I'm going to tap off some of the ink onto my mat here just so I don't end up with so much, so I can see what is going to happen on this. It's better to start with less ink and add more as you go. So grit paste has some porousness to it, and it's going to take this ink on, which I just think has this really cool look. I really like how you see the joints, the mortar joints in the brick, and then you get a different look on the brick. I just think that's really fun. So I had my Scripty Love there so I could see the placement of my next heart here, and I'm going to use Peacock for this one. This is the darker of the two teals that I've picked out. And you can see just how nicely that paste takes the color. So now I am moving on to the orange heart, and this is Fake Tan ink. Next, I'll move on to the yellow one, and I am wiping off the stencil between each color just so I don't contaminate my colors. Now, what's on the tape that you see there, that's not going to rub off, but anything that's on the stencil part that's left can rub off and contaminate the colors. So I'm sure to wipe that off between each color. And then finally, for the lighter teal heart up here, I started out with Merman, and that's what you're going to see me use first. But once I got it on there and compared it to my paper, I felt like it was a little too green on this paste. Because on the paste, it looked a little more green than I feel like my ink swatch looks. So you're going to see I'm going to pull that off. I'm going to compare it, and I feel like it's too green and needs a little more blue in there. So I'm just going to line it back up. And I'm going to go back over it with mermaid ink. So this one's a little darker and a little more the teal color that I wanted. So this particular heart is actually two colors sort of blended together, but that is why I went back with the mermaid, and I just think it matches a little bit better. So now for the splatters. So I didn't want to splatter all over this. I wanted it to look like when each of these hearts were stenciled onto this wall, some of the paint was dripped. So I'm just taking each of those colors, putting a little bit right on my craft mat, and I'm just adding a little bit of water. And I am going to do the yellow as well. I just didn't do it at first because I wasn't sure if I wanted splatters with every heart or just a couple. So these are what I'm going to call controlled splattering. So I'm just picking it up with my paintbrush, and instead of tapping my paintbrush and letting it flick everywhere, I'm just putting these little dots right near each color. So this will kind of keep the colors near the hearts that match that same color, so you don't get the dark splatters of this peacock that I'm using right now up at the top of the panel, and it saves a lot of that really cool brick white on white texture that we created. It might actually be fun to try this by tinting the paste to make like a colored brick wall, and then seeing if maybe oxide inks or pigment ink stenciled over top and seeing how that looks. I might have to try that. So here I am adding in the yellow, so I decided that every color needed some splatters. And this dries pretty quickly, and since that grit paste is already dry, it just sort of absorbs it a little bit. So now that that is all finished and dry, I can continue to put together the rest of my card. So I'm going in with that Hello Sunshine striped paper. And then for this panel, I'm going to put some foam behind it so it's popped up a little bit. So to finish off the sentiment part of this card, I am going to white emboss the word sending on this little strip of narwhal cardstock, and this will go with the scripty love so that our sentiment says sending love. So I've just added a little bit of the anti-static powder to this little strip. I'm going to stamp the word sending with some clear embossing ink. And I'm stamping it to one side so I can trim off the excess. This also gives me a place to hold this with my tweezers while I heat it up with my heat tool so that I don't burn my fingers. So now this is all melted and you have that nice bright white sentiment, and I can just trim off the end to the length that I want. I'm going to add some liquid glue to the back of this scripty love, and this will help make sure that it sticks down to that texture that is behind it, to that grit paste that's down there. And then I decided I wanted to trim down the panel that the sending is on just a little bit more so it's a little smaller. So I just trimmed it closer to the stamped word. And then I will use liquid glue to put that down as well. The liquid glue works really well on that texture. You can also see that I have all those little pink hearts scattered around. Those are just there for placement at the moment. Those are die cut from some guava cardstock. I actually keep a ton of these little hearts just cut on my desk for reasons just like this. When you feel like you just need a little bit more embellishment, you already have some of these hearts on hand. So anytime I have some small scraps, I just run those heart dies through, and so I just have a collection of hearts on my desk to use for any card. So now I've got all those glued down, and then this is my finished graffiti card, and I just think that it turned out so very cool, and I really love the technique of the ink over the texture paste. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.